Welcome to the Woman Who Makes Things Happen show. My name is Agnes van Rhijn. I'm the owner of Success on Your Own Terms, where I help female entrepreneurs and small business owners create order out of chaos by implementing mindset, strategies, systems and tools so that they can work on their business and no longer in it. Today, it's my privilege to be interviewing Lindsay Fischer. Lindsay is a survivor of domestic violence who turned her life around and uses her voice to help others find theirs after facing trauma. A best-selling and award-winning author and former high school English teacher, Lindsay empowers audiences by showing them that sharing their own story eradicates shame and guilt and makes growth possible. Welcome to the Woman Who Makes Things Happen show, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It is early, but I'm really thankful to be here. So thank you for having me on. Hello.
Yeah, it's very early for you, huh? What is it?
It is.
7:30, something like that?
Yeah, and 7:30 normally isn't that early, but since the time changed, it's really 6:30.
Oh, yeah. You changed the time this weekend. Yes, right. I forgot that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I know more about your story, but the listeners don't. Tell us more about you.
You hit kind of the highlights, if you will, in your introduction, but I will introduce myself again. So I'm Lindsay Fischer, a survivor of domestic violence in my 20s. At 25, I met a man who I thought was going to be everything that I could have wanted. I was teaching high school English at the time in my second year of teaching. I had bought a house. I had a brand new car. I was successful for a 25-year-old who thought that they wanted to teach high school English, as my career. And I was very happy. Ultimately, what ended up happening is he was abusive. It took me about 18 months to sort of figure that out. That is pretty quick for a domestic violence situation. Most people stay a lot longer than that. I was fortunate enough to kind of get out. He went from 0 to 60, and I knew that I was probably going to die if I stuck around longer than that. So I got out at the age of 27. I lost my house to foreclosure after leaving him because he was financially abusive as well. Mm-hmm. I lost my car. I didn't have a job. I lost my teaching job. And so, from 25, where I had almost everything that I wanted, to 27, where I had nothing, was a huge transitional point for me. There was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of heartbreak and anger that I needed to come back from. Ultimately, for me, what I found is that the easiest way for me to sort of rebuild my life was to stay busy. And in doing that, it didn't actually allow me to heal the emotional side. So I got busy with trying to find a job and sort of rebuild. And then when I did rebuild, I realized that the mental and the emotional, I don't want to call it instability, but the trauma was still there.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of digging, and I found a nonprofit that offered trauma therapy to survivors of abuse. I went there for 3 years. So my relationship was 18 months, but the therapy from that took 3 years to recover. And about that time, I started blogging. So as a way, because there was a lot of family that didn't understand what I had been through. There was a lot of people that did not truly understand why I was still so unhappy. They thought, the leaving would be the moment that we could celebrate.
Yeah, it's not that easy.
No, it's not. And I sort of struggled with that too. But to keep this a little bit short, I started blogging. People started reading it, which was amazing. And something I didn't anticipate. And so that sort of pushed me to start writing in other venues. So I started writing on other blogs, some websites like XO Jane, The Good Men Project, Sweatpants and Coffee. And so it was incredible to get that sort of exposure. I turned my blogs into a book. And then I decided to sort of take the final leap, which was very scary. I wouldn't say it's the scariest thing that I've done because I've been through some scary stuff. But it was very scary to take the final leap and leave the classroom and push myself to sort of build this platform. Because ultimately what I found out is, number one, I'm still teaching doing this, but I'm teaching a different audience about something that I hate to say it's more important than teaching, literary classics,
it's different.
But teaching something that society could really use right now.
Mm.
And so that's what I do. I wrote a memoir, and I speak publicly, and in kind of in the middle of that, if I'm not doing either of those things, I write for other people. So I'm definitely a word nerd. I've stuck to that. I'm just using it in a different capacity at this point.
Amazing. So we will unravel a few of the things that you mentioned. My own story. I can relate definitely because, well, I did not go through physical abuse at all, but psychologically, yes, it was very tough. But for me, it arrived much later in life. So I think that for me also, I stayed in it only 1 year. So as you say, only 18 months. In my case, it's because of my life experience and the personal development that had gone before.
Right.
I identified it fairly quickly and stepped out. But I certainly can relate when you say that it takes much longer to heal.
Yes.
From it. And I had a reversed process, maybe again because of my age, is that I went through the deep inner work first before I started taking action. And for me, it was the complete opposite. I was completely paralyzed. I wasn't doing anything anymore.
Right.
So it is, I was going to say funny. No, those situations are never funny, but how we can adapt to a situation in a very different way.
Yes.
So coming back to what you were saying, because this is obviously very inspirational for women that are in situations like that and who have this impression that they will never come out of it, that there's no way out,
Right.
and that they will never recover from it. What do you see as, what have been your biggest challenges?
In recovery, what have been my biggest challenges?
Yes, well, once you stepped out of it,
I think, honestly, my biggest challenges, even from the beginning stages of sort of leaving and then sort of rebuilding my life to now, are pretty much the same. Learning about boundaries was huge for me. That was something that I struggled with, and I think the majority of women struggle with in general. You don't necessarily have to be in an abusive relationship to understand that
it's very
we
feminine.
don't do boundaries the way that we probably should. So learning healthy boundaries, understanding how to say no to people. I think the other thing that I really struggled with is watching my family or my friends attempt to sort of understand while unintentionally, victim blaming. So they would come back and say, well, why would you stay that long? Or, well, why would you do this? And, that's something that they still do on a much smaller scale, even with me doing this work regularly. That when it does come up, they will still ask questions like that. And when you're not healed appropriately, it can be very triggering. When you are healed appropriately, it's a very good conversation starter. For me to immediately be able to go in and explain why that's inappropriate. But those are probably my two biggest challenges. I think boundaries are something, going back to that first answer, that I really have to focus on now, just because they're so important to me. And part of the reason that I ended up where I did, because at 25, like, boundaries, what's a boundary,
Exactly.
And I didn't even, I'm opinionated, I'm outspoken. I thought that was enough. And so learning how to sort of navigate that and respect myself, not that I didn't respect myself before, but to honor that respect by having these boundaries, is something that I think all of us, anyone that's listening to this, can genuinely benefit from.
So boundaries are absolutely an essential component, and I'm glad you mentioned the fact that it's something that is typically women really struggle with it in general, not only in those situations as you mentioned. One other thing that I'm interested in is How have you been dealing? What is your recommendation with fear? Because every person lives with fear their entire life. But of course, more specifically in a process like that, and in particular when, and both you and I have experienced it, where you lose everything. There's nothing left. And you start from scratch again. How do you embrace fear? How do you deal with it?
I did a lot of soul searching. So there was a time where fear dealt with me. There was a time where I let fear dictate who I was seeing, what I was doing. And ultimately, when I started teaching again, I would go to work and I would go home and isolate myself in my little city apartment and stay there with my dog and refuse to leave. Through the trauma work that I did, I really learned some tools. And, ultimately what that came down to was, again, I said fear was controlling me. I was so afraid of everything that I was paralyzing myself. So after, like you said, you were paralyzed. I went through this go, 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 get stuff done moment. And then once I got to a place where I felt comfortable, I encapsulated myself and wouldn't move. When I finally figured out that that's what I was doing, that I was unhealthy, I really needed some help with that. So that was part of what I worked on when I was doing trauma therapy. I did a lot of reading of Brene Brown. So the gift of perfection was huge for me, huge in my life, because ultimately what it does is when you're trying to control everything, you're trying to make sure that everything is perfect. And even when you've come from somewhere where things are so bad, when I'm saying perfect isn't everything that you've ever wanted. Perfect is just staying safe. And so I really worked through a lot of that by doing the reading, by going through therapy. And then ultimately, I hate to say this, but I think it's the process that we all have to go through, is that you have to make the choice to look at fear and say, I understand that you're here with me, and I understand why you're here, and sort of empathize with it. But you're not going to hold me back anymore. And I have to begin to start living again. So you can sit, this I think Brene Brown says this in one of her other books, but you can sit in the passenger seat, but you're not driving my car. Yeah,
that's what I always say.
And so I let it sit shotgun, as you will. That's a phrase from the United States, but I'll let it sit shotgun and ride around with me. But it can't control that vehicle anymore. I have to control that vehicle.
Yeah, you're the one in the driver's seat.
It's always going to be there, and it's it does get easier. You recognize it, you see it. It's still not easy. I say it's easier because it's a process, right? But since it's always there, and everything that you do, every time I put something new out, whether it's writing a book or putting an offering out in my business,
we all have it.
The fear shows up, and you think, well, I've been through things, right? This shouldn't be there. No, it comes back.
Absolutely.
It absolutely comes back.
It will always be there. Yes, absolutely. What I have found interesting is that once you identify it's there, because obviously if you want to get rid of it, you first need to see it's there. That helps. Is taking action, because your brain cannot focus on two things at the same time. The moment you focus on something else, and that's something you consciously choose to do because you've recognized it's there, you go through that discomfort for a few minutes or whatever time it takes, but once you focus on something else, it's gone, or at least sufficiently so that you can move forward again. It really is a key. So tell us more about the work you do now then. So you've decided to work out of that space and to bring that to others, to bring it into your work.
So when I started, I left the classroom in May of 2014. So I've almost been an entrepreneur for 2 years at this point, which is crazy to me. But when I left, I started with what I knew. So I started as an editor of books because I edited in the classroom so much. So I was editing books, and then I decided that, I had a voice that I wanted to use, and it wasn't about helping other people use their voices, though I think is a tremendous help, and I still do that. but I wasn't using my own through doing that. So ultimately, I started speaking on behalf of survivors and doing a lot of interviews and speaking engagements for nonprofit organizations who help survivors.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sort of grew from there. So I wrote my book, and it came out in July of 2015. So it's almost been out for a year with the publisher. And now I do a lot of talking about trauma recovery, because what I found through recovering through my own trauma, which mine is domestic violence, is that even my friends who didn't experience domestic violence but have experienced their own trauma, we all sort of go through the same recovery process.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I use my voice and my experience to show other people that whatever trauma they have faced, they can overcome too by sharing their story. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're doing interviews like this, where, you're having a conversation with somebody that you know. It doesn't mean that you're writing a book, but it means that you're not holding that in and making it something that you're ashamed of or you feel guilt for.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a secret any longer. And so that's sort of my biggest focus right now, is saying that by sharing your story in whatever capacity you are comfortable sharing it, whether that be doing what we're doing or going to a therapist or having a coach that you can talk to about life, right? Doesn't have to leave that conversation, but being truthful in that moment, you are allowing yourself to say, this is what happened to me, and I'm not ashamed of it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't control you. So that's kind of where I am. I'm traveling to do a lot more speaking, which is amazing, and I love it. And I'm working on a follow-up to the first book. So
coming back to the first book, give us the title, etc., if people are interested in finding it.
The House on Sunset, and it's available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. Like I said, it came out in July of 2015. It is best-selling, which is amazing, on Amazon. Yeah. I won an award at a local, I don't want to say local, at a United States festival. And we're rolling with it. She's kind of my little girl. I used to say she was my baby, but she's grown. So my little girl. And it details my experience with domestic violence, and in a real raw way that a lot of times anything that I read probably wouldn't do. And again, it goes back to that whole being honest about what happened to me. I wanted to do that. So I completely literally exposed myself in this book. And it was very important to me to do that, because I think very many people feel very alone, and I didn't want them to feel that way anymore. I know I felt that way, and I didn't want them to. So The House on Sunset details my experience from right before I met this man until probably a couple of months after I left, right up until I started my blog, just to sort of show the whole cycle.
Okay. And your second book will be about something similar or completely different?
Yes. The second book is actually starting to, so I wasn't sure what I was going to write. And as a writer, you sort of sit down and just brain dump for a little bit. The second book is starting to sort of take shape, which is exciting. And I'm actually playing with it in that the first book is a memoir, so it's completely nonfiction. The second book, instead of doing nonfiction and picking up from right where I left off in the first one, and moving forward, I am telling it as fiction from my husband's perspective. So my husband will be the narrator and sort of narrate, because right when I left off with the other one, there's probably a couple of months there, the difference. But he ultimately came into my life at a time where I was very much still recovering and was a part of that. So to be able to tell it from his perspective, I think will be really good for a lot of people, especially
interesting,
who are interested in dating somebody that's been through trauma.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's kind of where it's headed right now. Speaking from a male voice is very different. So it's a little bit slower of a process than speaking from my own voice. But we're getting there, and I'm really excited about it.
Excellent. Any idea when that one will come out?
No, the goal is by the end of the year.
Okay.
So I'm hoping to have a first draft done sometime at the beginning of the summer, and then that gives me time to sort of edit and perfect. So hopefully by the end of 2016, we will have a book too. And it doesn't have a title yet. That's how fresh it is. So
Excellent, excellent. Looking forward to it. One other thing that I'm interested in discussing with you, because for me it was a changing experience, is the notion of understanding that in a situation like that we have played a role in it. So what is your view on that?
It took me a very long time to get there, and I think that a lot of times, especially for survivors in general of things like that, they're considered a victim, right? We were victims of domestic violence. A lot of times that's the way that it's referred to. It's very easy to get angry and say, I didn't deserve any of this. Well, of course you didn't deserve it. Nobody deserves that. That's not what this is saying. What we're saying when you say you did play a role in it. I think for me, my insecurity and probably my ignorance to domestic violence, had I known more about it, I may have been able to pick up on those warning signs. But at such a young age, it's very easy to go in and think, you're invincible. This would never happen to me. Like, I am not that person that this would happen to, right? Until you are humbled. You are very humbled very quickly when you figure out what's going on. And so looking at that and saying, you know what, if I had this education, or if I would have had better boundaries, like I said earlier, if I would have respected what I needed for me more, I may not have ended up here. That doesn't mean that I deserved it. Doesn't mean that it was
No, of course not. Of course not.
Right. But what it means is that by fixing those things, I will never be back in that situation again.
Exactly. Because that's the importance.
Yes. And so that is exactly why I am comfortable with that. But I know a lot of, especially, so if anybody's listening that is early on, and they immediately start to get defensive, it's not about you being wrong.
No,
much
of course.
It's about you protecting yourself later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You don't want it to happen again. And so what do you do for it? Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
What can you learn?
Yeah, it's funny because listening to you was just making the parallel with my story. You say that you stepped into it that young, invincible, etc. And for me, because it arrived at a much later stage in life, that was the exact reason why I thought I was invincible and that I could handle it,
yes,
etc.
That's exactly true.
I already had that lifetime experience, so I know when,
Yes.
So.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, and a great point. I think there are so many times in our life where we do that. I look at my 20s and I think, because I'm in my 30s, and I think, oh, well, I'm smarter than that. Well, that doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes.
No, exactly.
Something is going to come up that's going to remind me that I am not, that I do not have life figured out. But and in those moments, you just have to make the choice, right? You just
absolutely
you choose to grow from that, or you choose to sit still and risk going through certain things again. And that's the unhealthy pattern,
Yeah, I must say that one thing that I say extremely clearly, and some people find it hard to understand, is that ultimately I am grateful for that experience.
Yes.
Because it has shaped who I am today. And without it, I would not be who I am today. So,
100% accurate. And I think I said that for the first time when I did a local university 2 weeks ago. Somebody asked me at the end of my presentation, would you take this back? And I said, I have known this forever, but I don't normally vocalize it because some people don't understand it.
Yeah.
I would never take it back, ever, because the life that I have right now is exactly the life well, number one, I've designed it, right? When you design your life, it's something you want to hold on to. And when you do the work, it becomes so rewarding that, I would have never left the classroom. I would never have married my husband. I would have never taken the leap into entrepreneurship or written my book.
Yeah.
And my life is exactly what I want it to be. And I am thankful for the experience that I had because of that. Because it has made me who I am.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can definitely say that without it, I would not have changed my business choices, because I was working as an executive coach for 8 years already, leadership development, change management, etc. And I decided to completely stop working with corporations because I've never really liked it. In fact, I was doing it for the wrong reasons. And I would never have been in London because I decided that I wanted to move to London after having spent most of my life in France and part of it also in the Netherlands. And well, I'm enjoying every minute of it. So yeah, absolutely. So do you work also with individuals? I mean, do you do one-on-one work as well with the clients?
I do, and actually that's sort of more related to writing than it is anything else. And I'm sort of toying with doing some sort of coaching for anybody that wants to do a memoir, but that's I think kind of down the line here. Ultimately, what I do right now is ghostwriting and copywriting. So anybody that needs a copywriter for their website, I'm writing that copy. People are uncomfortable with blogging, and they, you know, they'll shoot me their topics and I'll write their blogs for them. This sort of is very interesting because it goes back to using your voice, right? Because I say that's what I talk about so much. This is very similar for me in that my goal in helping somebody write their content is finding their voice.
Yeah, good point.
You know, I can write whatever you want me to write, but if it doesn't sound like you, it's not going to be helpful to the audience that your voice, right? So this is where I sort of geek out. This is like the word nerd side of me, is that it brings in the math brain and it brings in the English brain. So I get to manipulate language to make it sound like this person so that their audience gets what they need out of it. And it's really interesting for me. I love doing it. Hopefully what this is going to become, because like I said, I do so many different things right now, which is great. I don't have to let go of any of that. But I do ultimately want to start coaching, but specifically with women who want to write a memoir about whatever experience they have. That's sort of my bread and butter. And so I'm really good at helping people sort of, you know, extract from themselves versus any other kind of book. I can coach anyone on a book, but if I can help these people get these ideas out of their head, that's such a healing experience. I would love to be able to do that.
Excellent. So if on those topics of copywriting, etc., people can want to work with you, where can they find you?
So I've got two websites right now. The first one is if you're interested in having me come out and do a speaking engagement or talk about my book, a book signing, you can find my website and my contact information at survivorswillbeheard.com. And then copywriting and ghostwriting, all of my kind of writing clients can find me at Lindsay Fischer, and it's FISCHER, copy.com. So I'm those two places. My social media links are all hosted there too. So if they want to find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, any of those, they can find me through the websites. Okay, excellent. I will make sure that when I release your interview, I indicate both websites, because obviously they're talking about two very different things. Yes, so, awesome. Thank you. Excellent. Lindsay, it was amazing having you. I'm really delighted. It's been quite a long time since we connected the first time. Yes. So it was great having you again. And so for the listeners, if you too are interested in either reinventing your life or go after your dream, you can have a complimentary discovery consultation with you. I can definitely help you do so. And for that, you can go at www.agnesvanrijn.com, and that is ANYESVANRHIJN.com. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Have a wonderful day and see you at the other side. Thank you. Bye.